almost in a crazy way, the issue of abortion has, been an issue where truth seems to get stumbling in the streets very, very quickly. And so, what I want to be able to do is look at the issue, because it is an issue that is central to the election right now, and help you wherever you stand to understand what these issues are, what the myths are, what some of the things we're seeing in the press, or in ads, that are either true or not true, and what the basis for it all is. And because we're a Christian organization, we're going to look at this through the objective lens of what I call an inalienable, that is, never changing worldview, the worldview that our framers of our Constitution had, a worldview that is consistent with biblical principles, and in that perspective that our founders had said that one of the primary roles of a moral government was to protect human life. And Thomas Jefferson even said, and he was no he was no religious person by any means. Well, in some ways he was, but not least of all the framers. He said that the care of human life and happiness, not their destruction, is the first and only legitimate goal of government. And so, although government has to protect liberty, and it is very essential that government protects liberty, the interest in life is clearly superior and more important, because life without liberty at least holds the potential for liberty being renewed at some future time. But liberty without life means nothing. It's a nullity. And so, through the lens, or through the perspective of this framers, founders of our Constitution, through that worldview, no one has a liberty right to unnaturally terminate one's life by way of abortion or doctor-assisted killing, simply because doing so is wrong. There is a right and there is a wrong. What is wrong cannot be a right. This sacred standard, sometimes called an inviolable standard, from a secular perspective, if you want to call it an inviolable standard, from a religious perspective, you can call it a sacred standard, means the same thing. It proceeds from the premise that human life has intrinsic value and that human life has purpose at all time. And the Hippocratic Oath, and that was written way back in the 5th to 14th century, before Christ was even born. It attests to that timeliness and inviolability, that sacredness, if you will, of that moral absolute, that human life is worthy of protection. And that was the doctor's oath. And that doctor's oath began as a prayer, and declared the dedication of this cult of physicians, if you will, including the following statement: I will neither give a deadly drug to anybody if asked for it, nor will I make a suggestion to this effect. Similarly, I will not give to a woman an abortive remedy. In purity and holiness, I will guard my life and my art. And every doctor was to take that and affirm that oath. And so, historically, the United States did not recognize a liberty right to abortion, didn't recognize a liberty right to physician-assisted killing, physician-assisted suicide, or assistance in committing a suicide. And so, I would suggest, indeed, consistent with this worldview of the framers of our Constitution, we historically could see some natural law, some divine prohibitions on this kind of conduct. And we saw it embodied in the common law. We saw it embodied in statutory law of the time. And it makes sense, given that Western culture based their ethical and their legal systems, in part on the Judeo-Christian tradition. Certainly Greco-Roman and traditions as well, but these ethical and legal systems, that there was this idea that there was a right and a wrong, and that had to be part of the law, including the law, with regard to the value of human life. It was our framers understood that, and they understood it as a moral absolute. And so the framers of our Constitution, God creates human life with moral purpose and with dignity. And so um, you get to that place when you start with the perspective that there is a right and wrong, and it's naturally there. You can believe God gives it to us. That's what I believe. You can believe that it's just naturally there, but it's an objective, unalienable worldview. And I keep using that word unalienable because it's in our Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident. And why are these inalienable rights? Well, because they can't be taken away. They can't be given to you by anybody. They're naturally there. God gives them there. And you know what? Those liberties and that right to life, for example, is going to be there until he returns. And so very good illustration of this kind of perspective, this objective worldview. It is the Supreme Court's decision in Washington versus Glucksberg. And in that case, the court looked at the American Constitution, and you had some lawyers out there that were arguing that, hey, somewhere in this American Constitution, it's kind of an amorphous, in the penumbras out there floating around, is a constitutional right to assisted suicide. You have a right to have a doctor assist you in killing yourself. Well, the court said, well, wait a minute, we're reading the Constitution. I don't see it anywhere in here. And so specifically the court said and made a legal holding that committing suicide or assisting somebody to kill himself was not a unalienable fundamental liberty interest under the Constitution because it wasn't in there. And so the court there looked to the deeply rooted cultural and legal traditions of our nation that I had been talking about earlier in reaching its decision, and concluded that the unalienable nature, that is, you can't give it away, it can't be taken from you, government can't give it to you, government can't take it away, it's just naturally there, that this right to life is naturally there, and it's worthy of government protection. I want to read a little quote from the court there. It said, the examination of our nation's history, legal traditions, and practices demonstrates that Anglo-American common law has punished or otherwise disapproved of assisted suicide for over 700 years. And in light of that history, the court's decisions lead us to the conclusion that any asserted right to assistance in committing suicide is not basically not a fundamental liberty interest protected by the Due Process Clause, protected under the Constitution. Now, you can ignore that truth. You can ignore that objective reality, and you can get a bunch of lawyers and say, hey, let's shift and let's go to a different kind of perspective of seeing the world. And let's just, say that human life isn't always worthy, that some human life is worthy and some human life is less worthy. And so that, let me give you an example of that. In the U.S. Supreme Court decision of Planned Parenthood versus Casey, that was the case that was one of the Roe versus Wade line of cases. And in that case, the court used what they called evolving societal standards. I'm a judge, I'm wearing a robe, and I can look at society and I can decide that it's time to evolve the Constitution. And they used that perspective, that idea that judges can, decide what is right and decide, truth. And they said that, well, the law can interfere with this idea of personal autonomy, with reproductive autonomy. And three justices, for example, stated this, and this is a very good statement so you can understand how dangerous the other perspective it is. It said, our obligation, that is, me as a Supreme Court justice, our obligations, those of us that wear this special robe, it's our job. We get to define the liberty of all of you. And I'm quoting right now. Choices central to personal dignity and autonomy are central to the liberty protected by the Constitution. At the heart of liberty is the right to define one's own concept of existence, of meaning of the universe, and the mystery of life. In other words, because I'm wearing a robe, I can say that truth is not objective and that I can evolve it to mean that because I have the power, because I'm wearing a robe, that I can create this new right of personal autonomy and identity and reproductive autonomy, and say that that applies to abortion. So therefore, all of a sudden, surprise, surprise, we have a right of abortion in the American Constitution. And so notice, take a moment and notice how those Supreme Court justices, how their view on the source of liberty is so different than from what the framers said. Their approach rejects any concept of fundamental, unalienable rights given to us by God or naturally in existence. And you need to understand the legal philosophical mechanics of what are going on here. So, for example, government can traditionally prohibit conduct that is unsafe, dangerous, or immoral. And so, if, for example, government passes a law based on that standard that human life has value at all stages and makes it against the law to assist a person in committing suicide, or makes it against the law to assist to be a doctor and to abort a partially born baby, all consistent with what? All consistent with protecting that unalienable right to life. And so here the government, looking through that unalienable, that founder's worldview lens, is prohibiting conduct consistent with that sacred and valuable standard. Now flip it over and look at those on the other side say we should do. They use this evolving, very subjective worldview lens, this perspective that a judge can take that prohibited conduct that's designed to protect life, and instead of it being conduct anymore that is unhealthy and dangerous and immoral that requires the government to protect against it, the court, because the judge is wearing a robe, says, I'm going to recharacterize that conduct. And instead of it being unhealthy, dangerous, or immoral conduct anymore, I'm going to call it a liberty. I'm going to call it freedom, and I'm going to call it liberty. So now abortion and assisted suicide, the killing of an unborn baby, the killing of a partially born baby, no longer is dangerous or immoral conduct. Now it's a liberty right that the person has because of their personal identity or their personal autonomy. Those are that's a very dangerous approach to the law. And for those using that approach, it's intentional. Understand that it is intentional that this newly created fundamental right is completely contrary to that sacred truth and that interest in protecting human life. And so it's in the case of abortion, to understand what's happening right now on the TV and in the ads, you need to understand how that right of so-called reproductive autonomy, that right of abortion, evolved into existence. And it came out of the shadows of the Constitution. They used a fancy word they said penumbras of the Constitution. They said it may not be in the Constitution, but in the shadows of the Constitution, in the penumbras of the Constitution, there's got to be this right to privacy of intrusions into a citizen's home. Well, you know what? There may be some truth in that. The Fourth Amendment, clearly protects against the government coming in, to the privacy of your home. But they took that little piece of truth. And the devil is so good at this, doesn't he? He takes a little piece of truth and then creates a huge lie out of it. They took that little piece of truth and they evolved it into a right of privacy to mean not right of privacy in your home where the government can come in and stopping the government from coming into the privacy of your home, but they turned it into a right of personal autonomy. And then they made it a right of personal identity and said, this is a right of personal autonomy in one's body to use contraception. And then they took the next cases that came after that and they said, well, abortion's kind of like contraception. And if you got this right to bodily autonomy, this personal autonomy to do whatever you want, you get to decide what is right and wrong. Life doesn't matter. What you think matters. And under that approach, the court ultimately and subsequently allowed and stopped government from protecting and tried to and stop government from enforcing laws that would have stopped a partial birth abortion. And all due to this new evolved right to personal autonomy to abortion. Under this approach, the court subsequently also allowed pregnant children to obtain a government official, go to a government official. Don't go to your parent. Go to a judge, and get approval for abortion, and you don't have to notify your parents. And held a law prohibiting partial birth abortion, as I mentioned, unconstitutional. So the factual result is the same. An abortion of an unborn child occurs. It's just now considered a constitutionally protected fundamental liberty interest instead of prohibited, wrong, evil conduct. And that's where Dobbs came in. What happened in the Dobbs case was the court was presented with the question, did we get Roe wrong? Was that line of cases wrongly decided? And to answer that question, they pulled up a constitution and they read the constitution and they looked for the right to abortion in that constitution. And when they did that, they could find it nowhere. And the reason they could find it nowhere is because it wasn't there. And the only reason that it had become a constitutional right to abortion, like freedom of speech is a right to abortion, and freedom of religion is a right to abortion, freedom of press is like the right to abortion, is because even though those other liberties are expressly written in the Constitution, these judges just literally made it up. They said, we found it in the shadows. We found it in the penumbras. And because we're wearing robes, we're going to, be the people that say society is evolving and we know what's best for society, and we're going to add it to the Constitution. Well, the problem with that is the Constitution expressly provides for the way to amend it itself. If you want the Constitution amended, the people are supposed to be involved. The states are supposed to be involved. And there's provisions in the Constitution and a process for doing that. The people that want an abortion in the Constitution, though, didn't want to go through that process because they knew they could not get sufficient support to amend the Constitution in the right way. And so because abortion is not in the Constitution, where does it go? It goes back to the states. If you read the 10th Amendment, if government doesn't have the power to regulate abortion, then it's reserved, to the people and to the states. And so because there is no power of the government to regulate abortion here and was not as a liberty, it was incorrectly and falsely added to the Constitution. The court said, this belongs under our constitutional system, at the states. And since that's happened, we have some states that are passing laws that are protecting human life, that are protecting the life and health of the mother. And then we have other states like Michigan that are going just the opposite. They're passing laws that, are going to result in, taking away protections for the unborn child, taking away protections for protecting the health and the life of the mother, all in the name of furthering this personal autonomy, personal identity, abortion agenda. So you have the different states through the people's representatives in each of those states um, enacting laws, either protecting life or not protecting life, either, helping mothers to have safe pregnancies or taking away protections like in Michigan again, they've taken away the ability to regulate abortion clinics, any other surgery. You've got all kinds of government regulation making sure that the thing that is being done safely. Apparently, the abortion um, industry gets a free ride here. And so the Dobbs case overruled Roe because Roe was wrongly decided and returned it to the states. Now that battles over the issue of human life and the value of human life and abortion and how important it is, to help pregnant women and protect pregnant women. Those are far from over because the battles are now happening at the state level. And so here's where a lot of the myths have emerged. Here's where the battles have, resulted in a whole lot of, I think, lies and intentional deceit in order to help one candidate or another on one side of the aisle or the other get elected. And so I'm going to take a couple of these at a time here. And so myth number one, does any law mandate that doctors favor the life of a mother over the life of the unborn child? If you turn on Netflix or Hulu or any television right now or go anywhere, you've got all these ads attacking these politicians saying that they don't support they support all laws regulating abortion, including those that that are going to result in the death of the mother. And that is just, it's just plain lie. No politician has ever taken that position. No law in any state provides a threat to the life of the mother. There's not a single law in any state that says, when the baby's life and the mother's life are both at risk, that you kill the mother. There just is no law anywhere, never has been. And I spent a lot of time looking for, maybe one crazy politician that I could not find a single example ever of a politician taking that position. I'm seeing a lot of other ads that are saying that if certain people are elected, they're going to use the federal government to mandate that all states ban abortion. That is, again, completely untrue. We just explained how the Supreme Court and the American Constitution, as currently written, rightly puts this with the states. And no politicians supporting life, as far as I know, seek to refederalize the issue. Now, certainly there are pro-life politicians, and there are politicians that are, pro-abortion politicians. But, with regard to where that public policy discussion should occur, as far as I can see, the Supreme Court has spoken, and the politicians that support protecting life are saying this is where we need to fight the battle, in the states. So this idea that if you elect certain people that the federal government's going to mandate all states to ban abortion, I can't find a single example of evidence supporting that. Now, the flip side of that is there are politicians out there saying that we need the federal government to reinstate the Roe standard. We need to federalize a right to personal autonomy and identity that protects a right to kill an unborn child, that the mother should be able to have a doctor that a doctor should be able to kill an unborn child, and many people are taking the position that that should occur even, in the very latest stages where the child is even partially born, that the doctor should have the right to be able to allow that child to die even then and face no kind of uh, no kind of punishment or no kind of liability. The way I read Michigan's current constitutional provision, that new constitutional provision creating a right to partial birth abortion and everything, I see the way I read it, the doctors do already, within Michigan's state constitutional system, have a right to complete immunity to kill a baby even while it's being born or to leave it. Now, could the federal government, because there are people calling on the federal government restore a national standard at the federal level instead of it being done at the state level? That's kind of the flip side of what we were just talking about before. Well, the answer to that question is it's possible, but there's only one way that I can see that the federal government could do that, and that's under the commerce power. If you are a government authority at the federal level, for example, before you can act, before you can use your power to make a law, you have to have a constitutional power source that allows you, that empowers you to make that law. So if you are wanting to make a law to restore a right to kill an unborn child, then you've got to have some provision of the Constitution that authorizes you to do that. And there's only one that I can see, and that's the Commerce Clause. In Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3 of the United States Constitution, it does give Congress the power to regulate commerce among the states and to restrict the states from interfering with interstate commerce. And here we're talking about the commerce of abortion. There is an abortion industry. There, abortion is, big money. And Congress has the power because this is commerce. We're talking about the commerce of killing babies, though. But because it is commerce, Congress could have the ability to pass a law which would, allow for the abortion industry to kill babies at the federal level and create, protections, for doctors and for those in that industry. Next myth. You've probably been hearing some things about pro-life, and this is a myth. And the myth is that pro-life protections that call for regulation of the abortion pill, by way of phone. Right now, the federal government is saying, hey, one of the ways we're going to get around Roe is we're going to allow anybody to call up on the phone and get get abortion pills. And it's a nasty combination of two drugs. I don't want to get deep in the weeds here. But these pro-life protections that call for regulation of the abortion pill, what folks are saying is that endangers mothers. And they give an example of a mother that just, died at a hospital. Well, just the opposite is true. This combination of pills that you can now get by picking up the phone and talking to somebody, not even having to meet with a doctor. All the physicians that I've, talked with and all of the research that I've been able to find shows that they know that a certain percentage of these women that take this drug without doctors, having a chance to meet with them and go through this, with them and not meet in person with them. They know that there's a larger percentage than you would think that are actually going to end up in the emergency room, and therefore some are going to die. This does not have to happen. These mothers do not have to die. And guess what? They're not telling the doctors, the whole truth about this. They're not telling mothers that are ordering these pills over the phone, that are not meeting with doctors, of the dangers that can occur and the percentage of people that have these very, very dangerous occurrences. And so it's no wonder that that person did die, because the doctors were negligent and didn't follow the proper, medical, procedure. And the mother was able to get this, poison, this medicine, without having to meet with a OBGYN. So uh there's just so many things, but those are some of the biggest things I think that are out there right now. I hope that I've given you a little bit of a perspective um, on where it came from, how we got here, the current issues that we're dealing with, and some truthful information to combat some of the myths and some of the lies.